What's going on, y'all? Fabian Speaks, man. We are back with another video, and today the video is titled, man, don't blame your parents for their mistakes. They are human too, man. So, I don't know if you want to call this a little story time or whatever it may be, but this is my perspective, and I think a perspective a lot of people have already doubled down on. Excuse me for looking wild, man. Just woke up out of sleep, so just looking crazy this evening, but so when it comes to my parents, man, I think naturally everybody's got a different story, man. So take this with a grain of salt. But naturally, when it comes to your parents, I think kids look up to their parents just off the whim. You know what I'm saying? When you come into the world, they're the ones protecting, providing, feeding for you, and you look up to them, and you kind of look at your parents as superheroes. And I never really looked at, my dad was my hero growing up. I never really looked at my dad outside of that. And because he always had a certain stoicism about him, and he always kind of like kept his composure and things of that sort. And my mom was always on point, too, hardworking woman. But then like reality hit me over time as I grew up to where I realized that they were just people. And it was kind of a harsh reality to kind of grasp. And I think it is that way for a lot of kids, right? But the reality is that your parents are people too. I think that once I got into more like middle school years, 12, 13 years old, I started to realize, man, like my dad wasn't perfect. You know what I mean? My parents separated when I was around that age, so I couldn't really understand it. I thought it was just a hiatus of them splitting up. But, I came to realize over time that that he's just as human as I am, and he made his own decisions and choices. And there's obviously things about my dad's upbringing and past that I wasn't around to live for, so I don't understand the true depth. But I think wisdom and discernment can naturally allow you to get the take that parents are people. Once I have a child one day, my child will perceive or look at me a certain way. And they'll probably look at my flaws and mistakes and be like, I kind of see where my dad is not perfect. You know what I mean? So it was a harsh reality because I grew up in a very stern household, and like there was obviously a certain program to keep, obviously grow up with ethics, morals, certain standards, learning how to be respectable, things of that sort. So, as I came into being a fine young man, I kind of, there's a lot of things my father instilled within me. And, when he left, it was kind of like, I think for a moment in time when it was kind of like such a strict household, when he left, I was kind of like, I got a breather, and a certain part of me was satisfied. I'm not ashamed to say that. A certain part of me was satisfied, felt good that, I didn't have like my dad looking over my shoulder left and right. But that's just another layer to the whole piece of everything I'm talking about when it comes to, you don't fully understand everything your parents do for you and like what they instill in you until you get older. Over time, like I appreciate everything my dad did for me because it made me who I am. Like, and I really look at the structure and how I try to how I work hard, my mentality, and how I perceive things in life, and not being a pushover. My dad instilled all of that in me. Even though like he dipped at an early age, he still set a certain foundation for my life that I still have today. So with that being said, I saw the other hand of how my mom kind of struggled, but she's such a strong woman. She held things in internally, right? She wasn't really one to really break down. She kept it very strong for the family. And my brothers went off to the military, so I was kind of one that kind of had to rear the ugly head of things, face to face, being with my mom, and my brothers were getting deployed, and, they were going to different training camps, boot camps, whatever it was in the Air Force, right? So, but with all that being said, someone put something in a very unique perspective for me, and it was along the lines of like, imagine who you would be today if you hadn't faced the trials and tribulations you faced in life. Imagine if you would have took a right here versus a left. Imagine if your parent would have stayed versus left. And I can't fathom who I would be otherwise. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't tell you who I would be if my parents didn't make the choices they made. And it's a success story because we're crossing the finish line, man. It's a success story, and every action and the reaction culminated to who I am today. I wouldn't be doing YouTube. I wouldn't be being able to speak from this perspective. I wouldn't be able to have the trials and tribulations, gain the wisdom, gone through the suffering that I went to, because I think that a lot of the choices my parents made, kind of offset me on my own course to find my own truth, my own reality, my own goals and things I wanted to accomplish. There was a certain motivator behind the life I lived growing up, that I wanted to become something. I was so thirsty to become something. And it's kind of like the hand that I was dealt. Not to say I grew up in pure poverty, but it was just, there was a certain urge for me to do something with my life just based on how my life unfolded. And it's a unique perspective because I don't think there would be such a fuel to the fire if I hadn't been dealt those cards, right? And even initially, like, my dad was always a go-getter, always chasing dreams. And from an early age, I got that from him. Dude was very relentless in his pursuit on things that he believed in. And, that's something that has stuck with me to this day, that I'm very non-negotiable when it comes to chasing my dreams. And I don't care if I'm 65, I'm still going to be on the road to my plan and my projects, God willing. So it's interesting to see how it kind of made me grow up very early, right? I had to be kind of like the man of the house at like 15, 13 years old, even though I was still a boy, just me and my mom. So I would say just kind of like humanize your parents in a sense, man. They make mistakes, and children nowadays, and I think it's kind of been like this all throughout time, we tend to be very harsh on them. But it's natural because we look at them in a certain light. But as you get older, you realize that they're a person. They just had a kid and they did their best to raise that kid. So you can't blame your parents for their mistakes because you're making mistakes gradually and throughout your life as well. Like, how kind of put the shoe on the other foot and put it in a different perspective. As if you had a child, your child's going to critique the things you do. Your child's not going to agree with what you do because your child has their own life, their own friend groups, their own wants and desires. And as a parent, you have to be kind of that decision maker, that last line of defense, and they may not always agree with your perspective. So naturally, there's going to be contention. But they are human beings, man, and you got to have a lot of respect and reverence for your parents, regardless of how things turned out. Some people's parents, man, they abandoned them. Now, I think that's a hard pill to swallow because a lot of people in those situations may have been taken in by an adoptive family. They look at a certain male figure as their real father, or a certain female figure as their real mother. Or certain people in situations to where their parents became addicts, overdosed, or went to rehab, fell out of their life. So I can't speak from that perspective, but I think you could still humanize them in the sense that, man, maybe my dad was an addict and he couldn't break through. He OD'd. It's up to me to kind of, and that's a testimony, man. That's a testimony. It's not something to put on your shoulders, but I think it's a testament to the fact that, like, you didn't follow along the same path of destruction, that you stood the test of time, right? And that's something that you could advocate for kids in the future. I always believe that people's experiences, their trials, their tribulations, attribute to a story or like a testimony that they can use to help somebody in a similar situation. If you're always holding in your trials and kind of the adversity you faced, I think that's not therapeutic. I think a therapeutic perspective to take is to use your story to help other people. You'll come across people who have been through the same things you've been through, if not worse. So that's naturally where, like, y'all can connect on that level. I think us as human beings were naturally meant to connect. And to today's day and age, the lines have been blurred in terms of what that really means. I mean, we could come together in community and just talk about our strifes, our struggles, and then, society or humanity will be leveraged or built stronger after that. So a lot of blame is placed in other places. Like, even if somebody is to blame, don't blame them. I think the fact of the burden of the mistakes they made is blame enough, when a lot of people beat themselves up for the choices they made. And, I choose to let go of that because I think I had a lot of pent up anger from my dad at a point in time. But as I got older, I'm like, it didn't matter. I didn't care to that extent to kind of just like act like he was supposed to be this perfect magician and he could pull tricks out of his butt and like everything he did was supposed to be on point, because that's not the reality. I think it's a humbling thing to understand that your parents are human too, right? Because naturally we want to pedestalize them, and I don't think that's the right thing, right? Because nobody's perfect. So at the end of the day, don't blame your parents for their mistakes. They're human too. They've had their own struggles. You don't know what it was like for them growing up in their parents' household, what would be your grandparents. You don't know what it was like them for them in their school days or in their schooling days with their peers and their counterparts. You don't know what trials, tribulations, temptations they faced as a child growing up that maybe introduced them to certain things or, put them on a certain path. But the fact that you were even born from their loins, man, is a blessing. It's a blessing in its own, because you have life, you have existence, and, we're put here to learn from that. We're put here to learn from that. And I believe that everybody's unique story attributes to what they can do to help somebody else. So comment down below. Let me know y'all's thoughts on this, man. We're all people, and we're all, in this world, in this life, trying to make something of it. But I think the bottom line is to understand that you're highly blessed, that you were even created. You know what I'm saying? So peace, love, prosperity. God bless y'all. We'll see you on the next video, man.